September 24th, 1877. Mount Shiroyama. 500 samurai. 30,000 imperial troops. Modern rifles against ancient swords. They knew they would all die. They charged anyway. But this wasn't the beginning of the samurai story. This was the end. To understand why these men chose death over surrender, we need to go back 700 years, to rice fields, to the first warriors, to when the samurai were born. Here's what nobody tells you about the samurai. They weren't just warriors. They were the answer to a question Japan kept asking for 7 centuries. How do you create order from chaos? How do you build honor in a world of betrayal? For 700 years, the samurai were that answer. Bodyguards who became gods, philosophers who carried swords, poets who killed without hesitation, and then, in one generation, they vanished. This is their complete story. Every era, every transformation, every battle, every betrayal, from the first warrior who picked up a sword to the last samurai who charged into certain death. 8 eras, 30 minutes, no shortcuts. Let's begin. The Heian period, birth of the warrior class. Before there were samurai, there was a Heian court. The emperor sits in his palace, surrounded by perfumed nobles writing poetry and arranging flowers. It's Japan's golden age of culture and art. But outside the capital, chaos. The imperial government was crumbling. They'd abolished conscription, leaving no national army. Bandits roamed the provinces. Rebels stirred in the north, and those refined nobles in Kyoto. They needed protection they couldn't provide themselves. Enter the warriors. Provincial landowners began training their own private armies to protect their rice, fields, and estates. These weren't just hired muscle. They were minor aristocrats, distant relatives of the imperial family, men who traded the refinement of court life for the discipline of combat. They called themselves bushy warriors. The world would come to know them as samurai, from the verb sabur ao, meaning to serve. 3 great clans rose to prominence. The Fujiwara, who controlled the emperor through marriage. The Taira, who built power through military victories. And the Minamoto, who would eventually change everything. The samurai developed their own culture, distinct from the poetry-writing aristocrats. They valued loyalty above all, bravery in combat, a willingness to die rather than face dishonor. They fought on horseback, raining arrows on their enemies before closing with curved swords. And they began developing a code of conduct that would later crystallize into Bushido, the way of the warrior. But here's the thing about powerful clans. Eventually, they fight each other. By the mid-1100s, The Taira and Minamoto were locked in a deadly rivalry. Both clans had the emperor's ear. Both controlled armies. And in 1160, at the Heiji Rebellion, the Taira crushed the Minamoto. Their leader, Taira no Kiyomori, made a fateful decision. Instead of killing all the Minamoto heirs, he spared 3 young boys and sent them into exile. It was a mistake that would cost the Taira everything. The Genpei War, the war that changed Japan, those 3 exiled boys grew up. The eldest was Minamoto no Yoritomo. For 20 years he waited, watched, planned. In 1180 he raised his banner and called the Minamoto to war. What followed was the Genpei War, 5 years of brutal conflict that would transform Japan forever. The fighting stretched across the country. Castles burned, armies clashed, and the Minamoto had a secret weapon, Yoritomo's younger half-brother, Yoshitsune. If Yoritomo was the politician, Yoshitsune was the fighter, brilliant, reckless, loved by his men. He became the stuff of legend, the warrior who led a night raid down an impossible cliff at Ichi no Tani, catching the Taira completely off guard. The general who crossed stormy seas with just 50 boats to strike at the enemy stronghold of Yushima from behind. The war came down to a single battle. Dan Oura, April 25, 1185. The narrow Shimonoseki, strait between the islands of Honshu and Kyushu. The Taira fleet, carrying the child emperor Antoku and the imperial regalia, faced the Minamoto navy. The tides favored the Taira at first. They knew these waters, but then the tide turned, literally, and then came the betrayal. A Taira general named Taguchi Shigeyoshi defected mid-battle, attacking his own side from behind and revealing which ship carried the emperor. It was over. As Minamoto arrows rained down, Taira nobles began throwing themselves into the sea rather than face capture. The emperor's grandmother, clutching the 6-year-old Antoku, leaped into the waves. The sacred sword of the imperial regalia was lost forever to the depths. The Minamoto had won. The age of the samurai had truly begun. Yoritomo didn't go to Kyoto to celebrate. Instead, he stayed in Kamakura, a small town in eastern Japan, and built something entirely new, a military government. In 1192, the emperor granted Yoritomo the title of shogun, commander-in-chief of the expeditionary force against the barbarians. It was supposed to be temporary. It lasted 700 years. The shogunate created a new power structure. The emperor remained in Kyoto, still theoretically supreme, still divine. But real power now belonged to the warriors. Samurai were appointed as stewards and constables across the country. For the first time, military men, not aristocrats, ran Japan. This was feudalism, Japanese style. Lords controlled land. Samurai served lords in exchange for rice stipends. Loyalty wasn't just valued, it was survival. Yoritomo didn't live long enough to enjoy his victory. He died in 1199, possibly from injuries after falling from a horse. His heirs proved weak, and real power passed to the Hoyo clan, who ruled as regents behind figurehead shoguns for the next century. But the samurai faced their greatest test from outside Japan. In 1274, Kublai Khan sent a message to Japan: submit or face invasion. The samurai's response: they executed the Mongol envoys. The Mongols came anyway. 600 ships, 40,000 soldiers, Korean conscripts and Mongol cavalry. They landed on Kyushu with weapons the samurai had never seen. Explosive bombs that terrified horses, massed formations of archers firing in coordinated volleys rather than individual combat. The samurai fought fiercely, but were being pushed back. Then a typhoon struck. The Mongol fleet was devastated. 1/3 of the invasion force was destroyed in a single night. 7 years later, Kublai tried again, this time with 140,000 men and 4,000 ships. One of the largest naval invasions in history until D-Day. For 2 months, the samurai held the line. They'd built a stone wall along Hakata Bay and attacked Mongol ships with small, fast boats. When it seemed like they couldn't hold any longer, another typhoon came. The Mongols lost half their force in a single catastrophic storm. The Japanese called it kamikaze, the divine wind. To them, it was proof that the gods themselves protected Japan. But victory came at a cost. The shogunate had spent everything defending the country. There were no conquered lands to distribute as rewards. Samurai who'd fought and bled expected payment that never came. Financial strain, combined with a series of earthquakes and dissatisfaction among the warrior class, weakened the Kamakura regime. By 1333, Emperor Go-Daigo saw his chance. He raised an army and samurai across Japan, tired of being ignored by the distant Hoyo regents switched sides. The Kamakura shogunate fell. For a brief moment, the emperor ruled again. It wouldn't last. Emperor Go-Daigo's restoration lasted exactly 3 years. His fatal mistake: rewarding court nobles while ignoring the samurai who'd actually won his victory. Ashikaga Takagi, one of Go-Daigo's own generals, turned against him. In 1336, Takahoji established a new shogunate in Kyoto's Miramachi district and installed a rival emperor. Japan split in two, a northern court backed by the Ashikaga and a southern court loyal to Go-Daigo, hiding in the mountains. For 60 years, 2 emperors claimed legitimacy. It was finally resolved in 1392 when the southern court surrendered under the promise that the imperial line would alternate between the 2 branches. The Ashikaga promptly broke that promise. The Muromachi period wasn't all war. Zen Buddhism flourished among the samurai, teaching discipline, meditation, and acceptance of death. The tea ceremony evolved from religious ritual to high art. No theater emerged. Ink painting reached new heights. But the Ashikaga shoguns were weaker than their kamakura predecessors. Regional lords, daimyo, grew increasingly powerful. The shogun in Kyoto made proclamations. The daimyo in the provinces ignored them. And then, in 1467, a succession dispute exploded into civil war. The Ōnin War started as a fight over who would be the next shogun. It ended with Kyoto, Japan's ancient capital, burned to ashes. For 11 years, armies battled in the streets. Temples that had stood for centuries became rubble. The fighting eventually sputtered out, but it destroyed whatever authority the Ashikaga shogunate had left. Japan fractured. What emerged was chaos,